Hi everybody, it's Christina. Good to see you guys. Happy Monday. We are going to continue on in our series. Let me see. Get this pin to the right area. If you are here and you can see me, let me know. Okay, looks like I'm in the right area. Let me just do a sound check real quick. All right, sound is good. So welcome everybody. We are continuing on in our psychic mediumship training series. Comments have been kind of weird today, so I may or may not be able to see them on Facebook. Let me see. If someone could just write a comment, just so I can see if I can see them. So we are on lesson 7, and if you can believe it, this has been a really long series so far. But just to give you guys an idea, I think I'm going to go to about 20 videos or so. Hi Franny, good to see you. Francie. Francie. I always want to say Fancy Franny. Francie. Okay. So we're going to be talking about today psychic surgery. We've been talking a lot about the aura. And so let's just get caught up really quickly, just like tell everybody like where we've been. First of all, we started out with talking about like who has mediumship abilities, what is a medium, what do they do, what are some things, how are some ways that they communicate with the other side, what kind of entities can they actually communicate with. We've also talked a little bit about shamanic journey. We've talked a little bit about the worlds in shamanism, the different planes or different dimensions of existence. Did everybody have a chance to listen to that one training that I posted? It wasn't a training that I did personally. It was a training that, see, I still can't see comments. Dang. Hang on just a second, y'all. Well, maybe I'll be able to see comments inevitably. That's kind of how it worked with the other class this morning in the private Lux Lightworker group. So we've talked about the different worlds. We have also talked a little bit about the aura. So last week was all about the aura. We talked a little bit about like the geography of an aura, like splitting the head into the 4 different quadrants, the lower worlds, the middle worlds, upper worlds, angels, gods, deities, etc. Down here is more like power animals, animal totems, spirit helpers, allies. This could be things like fairies, any type of other types of naturalistic kind of high vibrational beings. Then we also talked about like the left and the right, depending on, you know, what you believe about how the energy enters and exits your body. Typically speaking, left is the receptive and right is the projective. And so a lot of the times when I'm doing mediumship readings, and I'm actually talking to someone who has been that was alive at some point and is now deceased. Usually sometimes that will come across as like the maternal aspect of the client, the paternal aspect of the client, and here's where ancestors could be. Okay, so just to kind of get everybody up to speed on, you know, what that kind of looks like, even if you didn't quite watch the video last week. Today, oh, now I'm finally seeing comments. Okay, oh, thanks, Amanda. Thank you. Hi, Leah. Hi, Katie. I'm looking to grow my abilities. Are there other videos available too? Lots of them. Lots, Katie. This is our 7th one in this particular series. So yes, there is a whole playlist and you can find those all in the pin section of the group. You can also find them on my YouTube channel if you type in Tarot Biz, B-I-Z Mentor, or just Christina Quick and Tarot. You can find me pretty easily, but I'll also include all my links and things like that. Hey, Pamela. Hi, Jessica. Okay, everybody's starting to come in now. Good. Goosebumps with the fairies. Awesome. I'm also a fairy lover. I love fairies as well, and I work with them a lot. Yes, Jessica, Katie is here. Thank you for inviting them. I appreciate that very much. So today we are going to continue on in this series. We're going to talk about the aura, and we're going to talk about more of the darker aspects of the aura. So last week was more about like spirit guides and angels and power helper or spirit helpers, spirit allies, animal power animals, animal totems, ancestors, origin ancestors, and different types of animals that could be ancestors depending on your cosmology. And we talked a little bit about different cosmologies with different types of shamanic traditions. But today we are going to focus primarily on the darker things. And this is a lot of fun to talk about because not a lot of people will talk about it. So first and foremost, I must put a disclaimer out there that yes, we all believe or don't believe in curses or hexes. We all have our own beliefs about this, about how that is, how that works in the spiritual realm. We all have our own traditions and beliefs about whether these things exist or not. And the reality is the one thing as a professional, the best advice I can give you, whether you believe or don't believe in hexes and curses, is that people believe that they have them. So if someone believes that they have them, then that just kind of goes back to that loving detachment, being able to detach from other people's worldviews, respect other people's worldviews, and still be a helpful spiritual worker, root worker, light worker in their life. Okay. So, and also there's another aspect of it that has a lot to do with like, there's this whole idea of, especially prevalent with light workers who really don't deal with shadow or who don't deal with wounds or trauma. It's very, I have a lot of opinions about that. I can't get on my soapbox too much about that today because it's a long conversation. But what I want to tell you is that there's a lot of indigenous traditions, a lot of indigenous cultures out there that believe in these things. And for people who are, let's just say, white identifying, predominantly white identifying, to be all in these groups and saying, oh, curses don't exist, hexes don't exist, none of this stuff exists. Well, you have to think, where is that coming from? You may not think that it exists, but where is that actually coming from? It's coming from a colonization point of view, isn't it? And in a way in which we're telling those things don't exist. Why? Because that's what the church says, right? Unless you're Catholic. Or, Satan is the main thing you got to watch out for. But frankly, it's a lot more complicated than just some hooved cloven beast that runs around and causes chaos in people's lives. There's lots of different indigenous ways that this is projected and emanced out into the world. And it's important, I think, as practitioners to be very aware that even if we don't personally believe in hexes, that other people do, and saying things like hexes aren't real or trying to convince people that hexes or curses aren't real can be very, very damaging. It can be very isolating, and it can also be, believe it or not, a bit racist. So just thinking about that, that may not be a conversation you're ready for, and that may not be something that you intended to learn today, but it is what it is. And that's why in this group in particular, and in my school platform, we respect everybody's beliefs, and we can say what we want to say, and we can believe what we want to believe. But at the end of the day, being respectful of other people's beliefs is key to success, right? So what are some negative things that you can see in an aura? What does it look like? How do we get rid of it? And how are these things embedded? So that's what we're really going to be talking about today. So some of the things that we can see in an aura is going to be parasites. Now, how do parasites come about? Well, parasites you can kind of think of as like little bugs in an aura, right? How you might see them clairvoyantly, or how you might perceive them clairvoyantly, might be as little dark spots or little gray spots, or little storms, little lightning storms. I've seen people say that they see it like that. And also I see kind of like a little bit of an electromagnetic kind of like spot in someone's aura. You can also see fleshy kind of tumors within a person's aura. Now, we're not going to talk about medical mediumship today. Medical mediumship, we can do a whole different class on. This is more spiritual illnesses, okay? Spiritual, psyche illnesses. Illnesses in the psyche, not necessarily like cancer or autoimmune diseases, or things of that nature. That could be a different topic, though this is all beneficial and all related to that as well. And it's really the same measure, the same practical advice when it comes to getting rid of it, spotting it and eradicating it, right? So you live in shadow work. Awesome. Yes. Tulpas are real. What are tulpas? Tell me about that. Hi, Gemma. Hi, Casey. And I think that some of the best, most grounded light workers live in their shadow. And that's, they really are working on their shadows 24/7. That's really what a light worker is it not? It's someone who transmutes the darkness into light, finds the dark parts of themselves, shines the light on it, exposes it, nurtures it, heals it, right? So, the first thing we're going to talk about is parasites. And there's can be different types of parasites. There can be just regular parasites that are kind of like viruses. They're kind of like what we might call programs in the matrix. They're just these little bugs that kind of can come into your aura, and you can pick these up doing anything. You can pick these up going to the grocery store. You can pick these up anytime that you are in a vicinity of either lots of psychics or lots of spiritually inclined people, or even just regular people that, you're at the grocery store, or you're at work, or you're at school, or something along those lines. You can just pick them up just like a common cold. They're not sent by anyone in particular, not sent by, like, say, a sorcerer, or not sent by a witch or something like that. But they're just things that are out there and they exist. And there's also different types of bugs that are viruses of the mind, right? So these things could be like depression. These things could be like illness, any type of mental illness. When we're talking about shamanism, and we're talking about mediumship, and we're talking about mental illness, these things are all combined, right? Because right now we're talking about the spiritual aspect of it, the spiritual aspect of depression. We're not talking about like the physicalness, like your hormones being balanced. We're not talking about necessarily like physical injuries that you may have endured. We're talking more about like the mindsets that you grow up with, right? And we're talking about epigenetics. We're talking about also cellular memory. This can also be through ancestors as well. And we'll talk about like different examples of that. This is a military publicly released document about the studies on psychotronics, the effects of mind over MOM. And the reality of tips. Okay, thank you, Gemma. I'll check into that. I do emotion code. Is that similar to absorb energy? Are you talking about emotions as far as like the Abraham emotions? Are you talking about the Abraham emotional scale? Is that what you're talking about? As far as emotion code, if you're not talking about it in that sense, then I'm not exactly sure what it is that emotion code is. But it can be similar to absorbed energy, because it's like what people project out, okay? So you're going to the grocery store, you're all high vibe, and you're in your vortex, and you're thinking about what you want to eat and what for dinner, and you're thinking about how you're going to put up this post for your business, and you're thinking about how you have this client tomorrow, and you're just in your bubble, right? You're in your vortex, going along in the grocery store, and all of a sudden this person walks by you, and all of a sudden you just, you feel that darkness kind of walk by. And a lot of the times that is someone who is infected with a virus, right? It could be anything. They could be just simply having a bad day. They could have had an argument with their spouse. These are all ways that viruses and bugs get embedded within us, right? They're mood alterers, right? So if someone has like a certain mood about them, a certain vibe about them, that is, overtly negative, it's possible and probable that they have some kind of bug. It can also be a bug that is less, say, advanced or intelligent than a curse. A curse is very, very intelligent, and we'll talk about the differences between hexes and curses. But bugs can also be very, very less powerful curses, right? Bugs can be things like things you picked up from society about how you should dress a certain way or you should act a certain way based on your gender, right? They could be things you learn from your family about how easy it is to make money, or about the value of hard work, or you know, what it means to be successful in your parents' eyes. Like you could have, you know, when you have that feeling in the pit of your stomach when something's wrong, or like when you, it's almost kind of like, you know, you have homework to do, but you can't remember what your homework was supposed to be. When you have that kind of pit in your stomach, if you're a person, you can also feel it in different places. We say our heart physically hurts, or my solar plexus hurts, my stomach hurts, right? Or different, you know, my throat hurts, my throat chakra hurts, right? So wherever you might feel a physical discomfort, there's always going to be a spiritual correlation to that. And as mediums, we can often see that. So sometimes when you're doing a mediumship reading and you see maybe a dark spot in someone's throat chakra, and you mentioned that and you're like, yeah, my throat has been very sore lately, that could be a physical manifestation of that spiritual ailment. And that spiritual ailment could have been embedded by, say, a mother who yelled at their child for talking back to them and learned that they weren't allowed to express themselves, or they weren't allowed to argue when things felt unfair, right? And that may be a bug or a virus that's lodged into someone's throat chakra or a throat area that you might pick up. It's not as deep as a curse. A curse might be someone in your past ancestry that was maybe killed for being a martyr or something like that. Curses are a little bit more extreme. But you can have bugs that are implanted by other people, and you can just generally pick up bugs from having poor psychic hygiene. A lot of us as empaths tend to do the fawning and people pleasing and bending over backwards and things like that to avoid us feeling uncomfortable, because when other people are uncomfortable, we're uncomfortable. That's empathy 101, empath 101. And the empath has to learn and understand how to do loving detachment, where we're respecting that other person's aura, not absorbing the aura, allowing their aura to flow through this instead of absorbing it and taking it on as our own stuff. And that's why all the Extended Masters teach that you cannot help someone who is not ready for help. Right, Gemma? Some folks are chronically infected, and that goes down to what is their psychic hygiene, right? Are they in their shadows? Are they learning from the shadows? Oh, tulpas are materialized thought forms. Got you. I'm with you now. So another way you could have a bug implanted is if you are, or a parasite implanted, is by a psychic vampire. This is probably one of the hardest ways to get rid of a bug. This is like the difference between like a common cold and, say, a virus, right? A common cold might be someone else's bad mood that's projected out, and you feel that in their aura, and you can see it in their aura, and it's just, you know, just a bug that they've got. But that's like a common cold. A flu could be a little bit more like insidious, right? It takes a little bit more to get rid of. It's going to require multiple cleansings, multiple meditations, this sort of thing. And no matter what, as psychic service providers, no matter what, the most important thing, as Gemma said, we can't help people who aren't ready to help themselves, but we can help facilitate the transmutation of bugs, virus, parasites, hexes, curses. But if people aren't willing to make physical changes in their life and deal with their shadows and deal with their physical problems and start their healing journey, unfortunately, those things are going to come back. At that point, they do become more like a cancer, where they, no matter how many times you get rid of it, it still grows back. It's because the root of the illness the spiritual illness has not been dealt with. And not everybody is called to be a healer. And even if you can see these things, doesn't necessarily obligate you to heal this person. Sometimes your gift is just being able to see these things, and then you can pass this information along, and then they can go out and they can find a healer that can actually remove these types of attachments. Hi, Ray. Good to see you. Hi, Sonia. Hi, Cece. Good to see you guys. Learning boundaries is so important. Absolutely, Katie. Pamela says, I'm noticing it taking over in my text messages too, turning my words into sentences. Oh, the AI. Yeah, I know. They did a big update on Facebook today. I'm kind of getting used to it. Jessica says, do psychic vampires have to be human or even know that they are psychic vampires? That's a good question. The answer is no. Psychic vampires don't have to be human. There are negative entities like demons or even some fairy folk. And it depends on if, like, for example, you live in an area, say, that your land is cursed. Or you have land spirits that have been cursed by your lineage or someone else's lineage, meaning deforestation can be a curse to land spirits. Building with synthetic materials on top of a physical, natural place can be a curse for certain land spirits. And so you'll often find, like, say, and this is like more reading the aura, say, of a house rather than, say, reading the aura of a person or reading the aura of a particular plot of land. A lot of the times we can see that there could be angry land spirits that are basically causing chaotic energy because there is an imbalance of that energy exchange. Whoever came before then did some things that were scrupulous, right? And they really pissed off the land spirits. And so, yeah, there's that. And land spirits and can be psychic vampires. Other types of vibrational beings can be psychic vampires. We have things like skinwalkers. We have things like wendigos. We have things, I'm not so keen on the European mythology and folklores, but we have things like actual vampires and things like that. So that's kind of like how the folk land, or how the folk tales have kind of intertwined with the shamanic traditions, and it's kind of comes together. And sometimes they're metaphorical and sometimes they're a little bit more in a literal sense, right? Polluting water can absolutely be one way to be cursed in your family. What did you say psychic vampires can cause? They can cause parasites. And cords of attachment. Parasites and cords of attachment are kind of similar. Gemma says, exactly. That's what Jesus learned when he tried to exorcise all the entities out of Legion. The old crazy man and Jesus realized the person also has to be willing to do the work, not become vulnerable to the possession and attachment. Yes. Land healing has been a big focus for me. Me too, Jessica. It has been. And I will tell you that ever since I have started doing land healing on my land, things are just growing. My vegetable gardens are growing. There's constantly wildlife around my house. I'm constantly seeing pollinators and bees and things like that. So there is a process to that, and we can talk about that. Psychic vampires can also be people who are unaware. Someone who just has a negative outlook on something. Say, for example, you have this friend and you're talking about your business with your friend. You're like, I think I'm gonna buy this $500 banner for my psychic fair table. And you're like, I think it's gonna, you're going through it and you're like, with her, and you're like, I think it's really gonna make a difference. I think it's gonna really get people attracted to my psychic fair table. When I do tarot readings, I'll have my tarot reading name on it. I'll have my prices on it. I'll have some keywords about what I do. And I really think it's going to make a big difference. And then you have this friend who, for whatever reason, learned in their life that investing in yourself is pointless, or that they have issues with the fact that $500 is a lot of money. And so they might project on you that maybe you shouldn't, maybe they might start to try to talk you out of buying it because they can't wrap their mind around how it might be helpful. And you in your heart know that, no, this is what I want to do, but you're wondering why your friend is being so negative. In that instance, your friend is being a psychic vampire without them even knowing. Why? Because they have these programs, these traumatic programs, these limiting beliefs that they are projecting out based on where they are at in their spiritual journey, right? So people who are very new to spiritual journey and uncovering their spirituality and developing their psychic gifts, these people tend to be also, they can be gaslighters, right? Like saying that hexes and curses don't exist as a light worker is gaslighting to people who are dealing with serious issues, right? So there's different ways that in even ourselves we can be ignorant, and we can also be psychic. We can be the most spiritual, kind, compassionate person, but there are areas in which we are still, as professionals, still unintentional psychic vampires. And so we have to be very mindful about the words that we speak and what we say, especially to our clients, right? Because that is going to be a telltale sign of what we believe is possible. And therefore, if we have these negative points of attachment, then these parasites, these viruses, the psychic vampires are going to see that vulnerability and they're going to latch on and they're going to attach the cord. Okay. Hi, Sonia. Great to be here. As a retired therapist, I had to be supervised, and that helped me develop a good boundaries as a healer. That's good. That's great. That's good. Gemma says, there are many people doing psychic vampirism totally unconsciously. Yes, there are. It's mostly unconscious. I would say 80 to 90% of psychic vampirism is unconscious. And there's even positive psychic vampirism, right? Psychic vampirism is where you are trying to get more than what you're getting back, right? Or trying to get more than what you're giving, right? It's like an unequal energy exchange. But there is equal energy exchange where there is a form of consensual energetic psychic exchange that could also be considered vampirism. Say, for example, your friend is not feeling very well and you are Reiki attuned and you say, hey, let me give you some Reiki for like 20 minutes, okay? It's a gift at that point. It's a privilege. It's a gift. At that point is a consensual energetic exchange. Psychic vampirism mainly talks about different ways in which our energy tries to get different ways of people and entities, even non-corporeal entities, attempt to hijack our energy to accomplish a certain goal, kind of like a virus does. Like it sees us as a host that they can push their chaotic energy in, that they can manipulate our energy in order to feed off of the negativity, the chaos that they elicit in our aura. Oh, I know, Gemma, it is true. Jessica says, I feel like some sort of psychic vampirism has been connected to my family for years. I find it so challenging to share the positive things I'm doing with my parents. They are so negative. That is, unfortunately, unfortunately and fortunately, you are the new prototype. So it's up to you to dismantle those ancestral hexes. It's not really a curse, but it's more like a hex, right? Where nothing you ever do is good enough in your parents' eyes, or maybe your parents are overtly religious and they look down on you if you're a tarot reader or a professional psychic, or you do something that's like, you're a tattoo artist or you're a chef. You do something that's like not like go to college for 4 years and climb up through the ladder and, you know, like what they had to do. Or you can have parents that were laborers that really don't understand that you working on a computer all day in the air conditioning is making money and that it's okay to do that. Sometimes you will have parents that were laborers that really look down on us for not working hard, for not doing back-breaking work, because that's what they have known. That's how they understood the value of their work, was by how much pain and discomfort they were in, right? That's like the Christian work ethic. Yeah, so Gemma says ancestral curses can happen too. Yes. Katie says, what do you think about narcissists with that? Narcissists are psychic vampires. I would say that psychic vampires is the spiritual term for a narcissist. Yeah. Ray says, a good ritual is asking the land spirits of the crossroads for peace and happiness, then pouring most of the water in a glass on the ground with your left hand. Then you drink the remnants of the water and you say thank you. Yeah, so I would, absolutely. So repairing any relationship first begins with the willingness to ask for that peace and to have a conversation, right? Even if you're not sure exactly how the healing is supposed to occur, you can ask for the land spirits to tell you and show you how that will occur. Ask them what they want, right? And sometimes you have to, really build up a relationship with them first through offerings before they will begin to talk back and begin to trust you. So yeah, there's that whole other aspect of it too. I felt drawn to offering sacred tobacco. So plant medicine, plant offerings are a really great way to work with the energetics, the natural energetics of a particular spirit helper. So in this case, a spirit helper would be a plant ally. So some of the really good ones that you can work with, and this kind of goes with like cleansing and stuff like that. You can do, you can burn sage, you can burn is it lemongrass? Is it lemongrass? Sweetgrass. You can burn tobacco. You can burn cannabis. You can burn bay leaves. You can burn anything. Anything can really be seen as an offering. But there are some core herbs that, based on the indigenous tradition that they come from, have particular meanings. For example, sage is more of like pushing spirits out, whereas Palo Santo might be reconsecrating and making holy again. And if you are going to look into smoke cleansing of any kind, then my recommendation for that would either be to buy from an indigenous person or to grow your own herbs, or to be sure that you're buying herbs that are organic, pesticide free, non-chemically treated, because that can also incur hexes and curses if you're buying your herbs and things like that from non-indigenous people who have not been lineagely trained to grow and cultivate certain herbs. Because we often think that, yeah, we can just go cut down an herb and it has this significant meaning. But I will tell you, herbs that you buy in the grocery store and herbs that you buy at the dollar store cannot compare energetically to herbs that you grow and breathe life into yourself, or that you have purchased from a person who has been, that's their purpose in life, is to cultivate these herbs in a metaphysical, spiritual way that involves good reciprocity and good karma, good energy. Okay. So that is that is the most important aspect if you're going to get into plant medicine, is to make sure that you're dealing with a good quality product that doesn't incur any negative karma. Jessica says, dismantling ancestral hexes. I love that. I'm teaching my kids a new paradigm. Yeah, you are. And unfortunately, you just have to understand that there's your parents, they've done the best that they can. It's up to them. But what you have control over now is how your children grow up, and the lessons and the beliefs and the values that you instill in them now. That's what truly, truly matters. And, we would all love to have peace and understanding and repair with our parents. It's not always going to happen. However, I will tell you this. Sometimes it can happen after your parent has passed away. So sometimes when your parent passes away or a guardian figure passes away, then it opens up a avenue where you can do healing with that person. You can clear those lineages now that the person's on the other side, if that makes any sense with you at all. Yeah, so that's sad that they have to associate success or influence with pain, and that's just the way it was, right? That's just the way it was. Gemma says they also try to use us to experience the attachments they had while they were alive, like alcoholism, example, which you have to be careful when using substances. Right, yes. So and that's a curse. Alcoholism, drug addiction, mental illness, those are all curses, right? Those are inherited things. Even if you don't have, if you have parents that dealt with alcohol, I have no problem telling you guys that my father died in OD. He was an overdose, and he dealt with drug problems his whole life, alcohol and drug problems his whole life. And so even I naturally, anybody who has a parent that had addiction problems or had any type of mental illness like borderline personality disorder, bipolar disorder, schizoaffective disorder, schizophrenia, any types of those, you're hexed, you're cursed. And it's up to you to break that curse for yourself, lest you fall into the trap of your genetics, right? Lest you fall into the trap of your parents and just continuing on that cycle. So people like us that come from addicted parents must be careful, because we are already halfway addicted. Already halfway addicted. Think about it for a moment. So we have to, us people, we have to be very careful and really develop self-discipline, set up boundaries. And that's why I really like turning substances like alcohol or cannabis or tobacco, things like that, turning it into a holy ceremony. Turning it into a holy ceremony. So it becomes a thing that's holy, right? And not just something we do to pass time or to supplicate ourselves or to repress emotions, right? We are being the change. Yes, we breaking those cycles. Thank you, Gemma. She says, yes, my father was also an alcoholic. My mother bipolar. Yep. Sonia says, I don't drink because alcoholism is on both sides of my family. Yes. Samesies. I drink, but not even really socially. Just once in a blue moon. Literally, once in a blue moon. I might, have a glass of wine or something. But in my teenage years, oh my gosh, I used to be drunk every day. Started at 11? Yes, Pamela says that makes sense for when they passed over. I can focus on trying to fix the problem. Right. And, when people pass over, at that point, they become incorporeal, which gives them access to all of their Akashic records, which makes it easier to heal because they have a different perspective now, right? And Jessica says that in many indigenous cultures, the schizophrenics were actually the seers and the oracles of the tribes and were treated as sacred beings instead of social pariahs. And they were trained, right? That's the most important thing. Once they realized that they were able to hear voices and to hear spirits and that they were able to see and access other realms, they would immediately get with the local village elder, shaman, healer, and, if their society was set up in a positive way. Sometimes, even in old time villages, in the old days, they would also sometimes kill people for that too, if they suspected them of being a witch or something like that. But the more healthy perspective of it is they would get trained. And that's the most important thing. They would get that help and they would learn how to manage those abilities, and they would have an elder to be there to help them, assist them with being able to discern what they're seeing and giving them some sort of structure to that so that they can continue to be of service in their community and productive members of the community. Katie says, I have been working through childhood trauma and realized my family isn't ready to address it. I've been releasing those trapped emotions and doing a ton of shadow work there. Very good for you. Jessica says, hey, Katie, we were just talking about using those substances ceremonially yesterday. Yeah. Can we do rituals for other family members to break their curses? Yeah, absolutely. You certainly can. You certainly can. I believe prayer. I believe ritual, asking for help. Just if they're spirit guides, if you have someone that is struggling and they can't ask for help, then you can intercede and you can ask for help on their behalf. Whether that's asking for help from God's source, asking for help from their spirit guides, from their angels, right, to intercede on their behalf. So yes, I absolutely believe that can be done. But I think the most powerful way we can go about it is, yes, it's sad when someone deals with something and they can't seem to get themselves out of it, or it's affecting them in such a way that they're having a negative life experience, or it's suppressing their ability to rise to their highest potential, or to embody their spiritual purpose. Right? Because that's where the sickness comes in. When we can't embody our purpose, that's when we get sick. We get sick because of that. We get depressed, we get addicted, we get anxiety, all that kind of stuff, right? When you live your purpose, that's when you heal. That's when your body can spontaneously heal, right? Not everything. No, I'm not saying that you get terminal cancer and then, you start trying to live your purpose and you can heal from that. I'm not saying that can happen. I'm just saying that the healing journey can really only begin when we tap into our purpose. And our purpose is always to help other people in some way, shape, or form. Whether you do it professionally, whether you do it in your personal life. And whether it's just a spiritual thing for you to express yourself, or whether you do this on a professional level. Yeah, and Katie, do you think that your husband is your twin flame? Do you just prescribe to any of that kind of idea? And if your husband is your twin flame, I wonder how your father, if your father dealt with alcoholism, because sometimes we will have spouses, we will have friends, we will have people coming into our lives that are dealing with certain afflictions that we need to do some healing around in our own life. And it's coming in as a test, as an example of how we can practice compassion, and that's how we heal, by practicing compassion and acceptance. Jessica says, I wish I would have had an elder to help me understand my gifts. They were a source of fear for so long, not anymore. They are your strength. And the way you break that paradigm is to become a coach and to help other people, right? Pay it forward. Gemma says, my family has officially ostracized me because I won't just sweep my family traumas under the rug. Yeah, I can understand that. I can definitely understand that. Pamela says, yes, Dad was having some different perspective for years before he passed. Luckily, my dad was supportive of me, but some of my learnings I hadn't brought up to him yet as he was preparing to pass over, and I was only staying to realize it. Isn't that interesting how that happens and works? Your mom's dad did. So there could definitely be, Katie, some ancestral thing, an ancestral point of attachment there that your guides are trying to... I'm not saying that your guides are sending you an alcoholic husband, or that sending you a person to make a life with that struggles with alcoholism. I'm not trying to at all to be offensive. I'm just trying to say what things are, right? Just what things are, because I deal with the same thing. My husband has issues. I have issues. We all have issues, right? But it could be that you guys have a soul contract, perhaps some kind of soul tie, that you're supposed to do some healing, and he is the vehicle, the catalyst to help you do that. And you know what? When you heal, I bet you he's going to start to heal. You see what I'm saying? So it's twofold. You heal, you become a rock, you become his support, he can heal. And it's all quantum. Healing is quantum. Ray says, I become a bear if I drink too much. Spirit bear overcomes my body, growling and everything, crazy. One fight too many for me. Always a good reason, though. I can understand that. For sure. Katie says, that was intentional with trying to eradicate those gifts and helping to train those gifts. Yeah. Sonia says, I love how the Akashic Records... How the Akashic Records help heal and enlighten. I did not come into tarot or any of this until after my father passed away. His worry about any of that was what kept you away. You wanted a spiritual life. He was such a great dad. So yeah, so out of respect for him. Yes. And so that's completely valid. That is completely valid. So those of you who are coming to your spirituality, your spiritual path, and confidently coming to it later in life, sometimes we have to wait for people to pass over before we can confidently move forward in that. And that's part of the healing process. Absolutely. I definitely feel like once my father passed away, that's when I was able to actually heal a lot of things. And that's when I was able to move forward confidently into my purpose. You've learned a lot about your experiences through your husband. Yeah. And it helps you. It's a window into, because when it's your grandpa or when it's your dad or your mom, it feels personal, doesn't it? But when it's someone that you love unconditionally, no strings attached, you just love them, not because your survival is dependent on them, not because they provide you with clothing, comfort, warmth, food, but because you just genuinely love someone, it's easier to kind of sit back and look at that person and understand the perspective of why it was so hard for them to quit or why they made these decisions, right? It gives you a different perspective. Good. I'm glad. I'm glad for you. I'm very glad for you. Okay, we got to move on. Okay, so parasites, psychic vampirism, we've talked about that. Let's talk about hexes and curses. Okay. So, and bugs, I tend to see more as like little dark spots in someone's aura. I can also see them as like little bugs that are kind of going around, crawling around in people. So how you see them is going to be very dependent on yourself, on how you visualize things, because you have a psychic language that is unique to yourself. But there are some ways that we see them that are kind of like collective ways. So I do feel like, yes, we have our own psychic symbol dictionary, so we can see what these things look like in auras and have particular meaning for us. But I also feel like there's a collective, like, it's trans cultural, it's trans societal. Like, there's just certain things that we see energetically on an energetic standpoint that, like, this tribe over here sees and this village over here has seen, and they've, they're across the pond and they've never met or talked. Things like the flower of life, right? The different pyramids, different symbols, sacred symbols that we've seen. I think it's that way also for psychic symbols. Leah says, if we grew up in a very religious Christian background, could that be an energetic cord? Yes. Now I'm aware of spirituality. Yes. And so think about, if you grew up in a religious background, think about your foundational upbringing is rooted in Christian values. So working hard, what are some Christian values? Everybody fitting in, getting married, having kids, procreating, saving yourself for marriage, all these kind of things, all these Christian values, right? So this really influenced your upbringing. And your upbringing, your first 12 years of your life, is the most influential time in your life, because you're developing your thoughts about how the world works, your ideas of fairness, your ideas of good versus bad, your ideas of deservingness, worthiness, your ideas of appropriate punishments, right? And so if you have this kind of overlay that's influencing your early life, it's really difficult to move into your spiritual path without beginning to dismantle some of that Christian upbringing and realizing that a lot of that is for better or for worse. Some of the Christian upbringing is very good, working hard, being studious, being humble, telling the truth, not cheating, not murdering. These are good virtues, right? So we can't necessarily say that your Christian upbringing is an enemy. But what we can say is that it did project and instill into you things that maybe are harmful for your health, maybe harmful for how you want to express your spirituality, maybe not in alignment with what you feel or believe, right? So yes, you could have a cord of attachment to that. You could have a parasite and with that, and it will just have to be belief by belief by belief. Every time you find yourself thinking, is that really true for me? Or is that just how I think the world works? Right? So every time we find one of those little silver threads of questioning, that's a shadow, that's a limiting belief that we can do some shadow work on. Katie says, what would you say about dealing with a lot of close family deaths when you're younger spiritually? Oh, yes. So, yes. So I have a lot of that too. And that is part of the soul contract of the healer. That's part of the soul contract of the shaman, the medium. When you are exposed to death at a very early age, things happen in your brain psychologically. It's trauma, right? Your brain is shaped by your traumas. Physically, your brain is literally physically shaped by your traumas. There are structures in your brain based on trauma. Dealing with death is a trauma because you're dealing with it before you're ready, before you have an established worldview. So death when you're young is extremely traumatizing because you're not even really sure at that point. Say you're 7 years old, you're not even really sure at that point that things even die. You don't even know what dying is, right? So to be told someone died or to witness someone dying can lodge trauma, and trauma can be located in the aura, and that can be also in a way it can be cleared as well, right? But also spiritually it attunes you, right? So we know about attunements, like you can get attuned to Reiki, or you can get attuned to this healing lineage, or you can get attuned to this, right? And what does that mean? Like a radio frequency, you're learning about the station that you can tune into. It's an added tool in your psychic toolbox, like Reiki, for example, is an attunement. But death is also an attunement. It's also an initiation process, right? So when you are face to face with mortality at such a young age, and it happens over and over and over again, you can have parasites lodged, and this can kind of come through an abandonment wound. People I love are going to die. There's no sense in getting close to people because they're just going to die. Or there's no sense in trusting people because they're just going to leave me. Okay? That can happen as well. So that can be a parasite or a virus that's kind of attached. And it attunes you, and it attunes you to the other side. And when you deal with a lot of death, it opens you up to different dimensions of being. So a lot of the times when children experience the death of parents, or a large amount of death before the age of puberty, 12, 13, they can become more curious about it, and that can naturally allow more psychic development to happen. Also, I feel that when we actually see people pass, so I saw my grandfather pass when I was 7. He died right in front of me. He had a brain aneurysm. We were fine one day, and then he just died. And it's interesting because when I'm thinking back to that situation, I remember having disassociation. Disassociation is a tool that shamans use to astral travel. So these types of traumas can induce and elicit certain tools of coping that we utilize out of survival and instinct, rather than learning, say, as a spiritual tool to do a reading or something like that. The tools are always existing. We always have access to these. How we awaken these tools is different. And so when you deal with a lot of death as a young person, your psychic abilities and your ability to perceive other realms and spirits and utilize certain things like out-of-body experiences, astral traveling, aka disassociation, right? You get to access that a little bit earlier than, say, someone in their 20s who's going through a course on how to be a medium. So that can definitely impact you. The most irritating part of Christianity is the idea that we are saved, but others are not. That is also a very uncomfortable feeling for me, knowing that, tribes in South America they're not going to heaven because they don't know the word. Like, I just can't get behind that. I can't get behind that. I can't. Or everyone thinking someone else is going to save us. Yes. Casey says, I've often wondered about my health disability as it relates to spirit. And it's interesting because I also have immune diseases. Everybody has something, right? Like, everybody has something. You have asthma, or you've had cancer, or you're disabled, or you have a disease, a condition, or an illness, right? Everybody has one. I've never met a person that doesn't have one. And so while, yes, I do feel that there is possibly a spiritual component, and I do feel that it could also be past life related, I don't feel that it's something that we ever agreed to, and I don't feel it's something that we ever brought upon ourselves or manifested on ourselves intentionally to experience a certain thing. Do you understand what I'm saying? So, and I feel very strongly about the fact that people who experience illness, conditions, diseases, disabilities are never responsible spiritually or energetically for having those diseases or disabilities. I feel like that is victim shaming, victim blaming, and it's spiritual bypassing, right? Oh, well, you had a car accident in your last life and that's why you can't walk in this life. I mean, sure, that explains a lot. If that gives you comfort, sure. But does it fix the problem? Does it make you feel better? Does it empower you about the situation? And I don't think it does. Because then you're sitting there thinking, well, I would have never agreed to that, right? That's just how I feel about it. I don't know. You tell me. You tell me how you guys feel about that. How can we help our children release these traumas? Talk therapy. Talk therapy and developing emotional intelligence for your children is one of the best ways that you can release and transmute these traumas, because we need to give children the tools in order to express ourselves express themselves in healthy ways so that they're not resorting to violence, so that they're not resorting to attention seeking, so that they're not resorting to repressing and hiding and isolating and trying to deal with their anxiety and depression on their own. So just talking and developing conversational dialogue skills, like, for example, if your 4-year-old is having a tantrum and you let them cry it out, you let them get to a point where they release that anger and now they're in a receptive state, then start that dialogue. Can you tell me what you're feeling? If you can't tell me what you're feeling, can you tell me if it hurts somewhere in your body? Can you tell me what made you upset? And then just asking these questions. I think if I had someone there to guide me and ask me these questions and help me understand how to unpack my emotions, then I probably would have avoided a lot of those substance abuse issues in my early teens and early 20s and even into my early 30s, Katie says, I connected to the ethereal world a lot easier than the physical world. Yeah, and that's a symptom of disassociation, right? Had to work through all of that. Yeah. Jessica says, do you think that childhood trauma like abuse can catalyze psychic abilities? Yes. 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 So do you believe that we have soul contracts to experience certain events? I don't think so. I don't think so. That's just my personal opinion. I don't think so. I think that we are at the mercy of our genetics. That's where the epigenetics of cellular memory comes in. Like if I had alcoholic parents, or say, for example, I had an ancestor 300 years ago that was burned at the stake for being a witch, I might have, through cellular memory, fear of expressing myself, my witchy self, or I might have fear of speaking up or being different because I have that cellular memory, right? Or that hex on me that is preventing me. So my cells remember. And there's like, I've talked about this before in some of these videos where we've talked about, is there a difference between ancestors and cellular memory? Are ancestors past lives? Are they the same thing? Are they different? Okay. So that's a conversation you can have with yourself. It's kind of an interesting conversation. Yeah, I don't like it either, Pamela. Jessica says, I feel like everything we've gone through has helped me become the person that I can help others heal. Yeah. Yeah. And just remember, that's a choice that you have made. So feel good about that choice. Because a lot of people don't make that choice. Katie says, I think the majority of us didn't get that in our childhood. I agree. I think it was the time. It was the time, it was a time period. We're becoming smarter now. We grow, we evolve. Jessica says, some folks struggle with talk therapy because it reopens the wounds. Yes, it does. It does. It does. And if people struggle with talk therapy, art therapy is also really helpful. Because art therapy is a great way to express things without putting words behind them. So art therapy is a good way. Also learning divination. So get your kids some oracle cards. There's plenty of cute little fluffy kitty and doggy magical creatures oracle cards, right? Get them in a way, so if you can't have talk therapy, sometimes people can't talk with another person, but sometimes they can talk with oracle cards, or they can use oracle cards as a jumping off point, right? Where they can talk about it more in the third person, like pulling a card, and asking your child, what do you see in this card? What's happening in this card? And that will tell, kind of like those Rorschach things, where it's like, what's in the blob? Do you see a butterfly or do you see murder? You know what I mean? It's kind of like that situation where you can kind of get a feel for where your children is at emotionally by utilizing like art therapy, which can be oracle cards. It can be reading in books with pictures, things like that. Yes, it can. And knowing what doesn't work for you is half the battle, right? So knowing not to spend too much time on things that don't work for you is also really good. Pamela says, I wish I had the right questions for my oldest child when he was little. My mom and I were always trying to find the right questions for him, and I can understand that too. Yeah. Sonia says, exactly. Here's what I accept, and it makes sense to me. I feel we come into this world and have a contract with the body we use as a vessel, right? The body has its own data and own disabilities based on genetics, etc. Our soul is not our body. We're traveling and experiencing together, but we are not our body, and I agree with that. The cellular memory is real. I wonder if past lives are more like concurrent lives, and that's a good conversation. That's a very interesting conversation. Yes, thank you, Lee. I'm glad you're liking this. Katie says, I'm here for all your lives. Thank you. Yes, when it gets nice out, when it gets nicer out, I've got a fire pit in the back, so we will do fire pit chats when it gets nicer out. Yes, teaching your kids divination. That's good. Okay. Ray says, from my understanding, soul contracts are only agreements to goals you should complete with or without the help from another soul or souls involved in the same goal. They are not karma or curse related. I like that perspective a lot. Collages. Yeah, collages. Those are a great idea. So what's the difference? And we'll leave off on this, and trust me, we'll continue this conversation next week. And we'll talk more about this, because I did not even get to the psychic surgery part. We've only started talking about what can be in the aura. Next week we'll talk about how to actually do the psychic surgery part, how to ground it out, how to pull it out, how to feel for it, different ways you can grab it, remove it, things like that. Okay, so we'll talk about that next week. But hexes and curses. So hexes and curses. Hexes are things like that can be put onto you by other people. And these are things like jealousy. These are things like insecurity. A hex on women could be the idea that we have to wear makeup in order to be valuable, or that we have to have long hair in order to be feminine. That could be a hex. A hex could, on a man, gender-wise, could be short hair is manly, going to work every day, manly, lifting heavy things. That's a hex on men. It's an expectation. It's a societal, cultural hex that is on men and women. It's about unfair burdens, okay? Unfair burdens, right? Burdens that accomplish no goal other than to trap people into these programs, right? To make them busy little cogs in the machine, to make them busy little productive people that pay their taxes and, do the things that society expects us to do. There's also hexes that can occur when you do wrong or someone else does you wrong, okay? You were the side chick in a relationship. That can be a hex. That can be a hex of insecurity that you place on yourself. It can also be a hex that the other woman places upon you, right? That you're insecure, you have insecurity, unable to manifest long-term committed relationships. And that could look like continually, a hex like that could look like continually attracting unavailable men, okay? We see that a lot on the psychic hotlines, right? So I'm sure your psychic hotlines people are like listening very closely right now, right? Another hex could be an injustice, okay? A hex could be something along the lines of you cheated on a test and you did wrong. So now you constantly, for the rest of your life, are wondering, are they ever going to find out that I cheated? Are they ever going to call me out on that? Are they going to rescind my college diploma because they're going to find out I cheated? That could be a psychological hex. Another hex could be something like, a hex is something that happens to you in this lifetime, right? Or it could be something that was given to you ancestrally from 1 or 2 generations back. So that's kind of a hex. A hex can also be someone steals from you, right? And so you place a hex, you project a hex of hate, of discomfort, of disappointment upon that person. You place that upon their aura. You project it into their aura. If that person's not doing regular cleansing, if that person's not spiritually awakened, then that person will walk around with that hex and wonder why things are falling apart in their lives, right? Hexes are typically, they're kind of like jinxes. They're like when things don't tend to work out, or you get these repeating patterns that are like, they're not overly obnoxious and they're not like necessarily bad, they're just inconvenient. That's like a hex, right? If there's some level of karma that you've got to pay off in order to clear that hex, right? So a lot of the times when you're hexed, it's recommended, and we'll talk about this next week too, but a lot of the times when you're hexed, it's recommended to do offerings, like burning candles, burning incense, offering fruits, baking breads, making baked goods, right? Reserving part of your meals to give to the land spirits, things like that. There are ways, there are karma banks. There are ways that you can farm good karma, and you can kind of rectify that imbalance, that injustice that hex has a hold of you on, right? So sometimes it's not just like shadow work. Sometimes it's not just limiting beliefs, but sometimes it's you done something wrong, and whether you intended to do something wrong or not, you've got to climb your way out of the karma debt in order to get back to a homeostasis, right? So having other people, like for us, doing cleansings on other people, those are good for like bugs, parasites. Doing shadow work with other people, your clients, good, great for viruses, bugs, parasites, things like that, right? But hexes, this is really more of like, yeah, you can read into the hex, and you can see maybe how the hex was placed, and you can see what it looks like, and you can see how strong it is, and then you can tell the person like what are some things that they need to do in order to raise their karma to get rid of this hex. A hex is kind of like getting negative points put over your head, like negative, like everyone's walking around with a 0, right? And you're born with a 0, and some people have like plus 1,000, like Mother Teresa, Gandhi, Nelson Mandela, okay, Buddha, Ascended Masters. These are like plus 10,000 positive karma, right? And then you have things where you're going in your daily life, and this number changes all the time, right? Maybe you accidentally stole something from the grocery store and you're doing self-checkout. Totally has happened to me before, right? So what do I need to do in order to fix that karma? Now I have negative 10 points above my head, right? What do I need to do to fix that karma? Well, I need to go buy it. I need to go back into the store and buy it, or I need to give something away to someone else of a similar value, right? So maybe I don't go back to the store and buy it, but maybe I make a loaf of bread for my neighbor, and that will help repair that karma. You see what I'm saying? Curses are much more insidious, and curses are questionable whether they can even, in my opinion, be gotten rid of or not. Sometimes I think that we are born into curses. So for example, colonizers, people of a predominantly white ethnicity, we're automatically cursed. If you have ancestry from any countries or any regions where colonization happened, we're cursed, okay? But there's many different ways that you can be cursed. That's just one of the big curses that I know about, because that's one of the ones that I deal with. So some of the ways that I can quell that curse is I can make reparations. I can spend money at Black businesses. I can support Black entrepreneurs. I can buy from Indigenous people. I can put money into Indigenous communities, right? I can advertise my Indigenous and people of color and even LGBT, right? Because LGBT people were killed too by people that I've come from. And so that is one area where we can, and I don't know if I could ever make up for anything bad that's ever happened over my lifetime, but you know, it's one of those things where you just try to. Curses can also happen, for example, if you, in your family 300 years ago, your family were killed, right? Say you were on the other end of that colonization, your family was wiped out, or your traditions were, you had to move, you were displaced. Yeah, healing the land does count. Healing the land does count. Setting up things like fairy gardens and pollinator gardens, that helps. Not using pesticides on your earth, that helps. Setting food out for the wild animals, that all helps. So when you're cursed, there's your lifestyle becomes a measure of trying to reverse that curse. And putting positive karma. So that on a spiritual aspect, you can repair. I can have a better relationship with, say, Black ancestors, right? Because I'm trying to put right what has been wrong. And I will never make it right, but I can try to do something. You know what I'm saying? So let's say 300 years ago, your great, 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 great grandmother was killed for being a witch. And this displaced your family. There was a couple children and the husband, and maybe the husband worked himself to death and went to an early grave. The children grew up. They were laborers. They didn't get a good education because they didn't have money because their parents died early. And so as these children are growing up and becoming part of the world, their curse that, their mother was killed, that is a curse that's placed on the other family too, right? So curses are really unforgivable acts. Curses are things that you will never, ever really be able to make right because the negative karma bank is so deep. It takes a collective. And usually curses are not individual. Curses are typically ancestral, or they may belong to certain lineages, if that makes any sense. And again, this is just my opinion. You don't have to agree with me on this. And it doesn't have to be the way that you look at things, okay? But curses, I always see like hexes are like, and this is how it's come, because I do a lot of my healing in dreams. So a lot of my shamanic ways that I heal myself and others comes through dreams, in the dream world. So I have had dreams before. So like when I'm doing a reading, I might see some certain dark spots or something like that in someone's aura, and I may not be able to get a lot of information from that. Sometimes I can, but sometimes I can also set the intention to heal someone or to heal myself in dreams. And I remember a couple times I've had dreams where I've seen people with strings hanging out of them. Like they'll have a string hanging out of here, or they'll have a string hanging out of there. And in my actual dream, I go up to the person and I start pulling that string. This is another way that I'm going to teach you guys next Monday about how to actually do the psychic surgery. Pulling the strings out or cutting the strings is really good. I recommend pulling strings first. Pull the string first to see what's attached before you cut it, because you don't want to cut it and then not get the root of it, right? So in my dream, often I will see a string and I'll start pulling the string. And when I finally get to the point, like something will go pop out of them and it looks like a little tentacle type of tumor. That's what it appears to me in my dreams, okay? Curses are a lot more insidious. Curses are, they can come across as actual monsters. They can come across as actual demons. They can come across as incarnate evil kind of beings. And this is sometimes where we get like, through the Catholic Church, sometimes we get through like exorcisms, like you have to do an exorcism. But there's also indigenous and shamanistic ways of doing exorcisms and doing soul retrieval and things like that, that they could be, the curse could be so strong on an energetic standpoint that it can materialize thought form into a beast. Okay. Sometimes it looks like a demon. Sometimes it looks like a devil. It may have cloven hooves. Whatever you see is based on what you're expecting to see, right? So if you grew up with Christian iconography, right? Then you might see a demon. If you grew up in an indigenous tradition, you may see animals. You may see rattlesnake, or you may see different types of golem kind of creatures where they're kind of like these underground looking kind of scary creatures. There's also the manifestation of the little green men and the little gray men, right? That can also be a manifestation of a curse. And there's a good conversation there between the intersectionality between UFO abductions, UFO sightings, UFO encounters, and curses, and the manifestation of a curse. lots of combative dreams lately. That's not the norm for me. It could be that you are dealing with a hex, or that you have someone in your environment that has a hex. So whenever you have that happen, ask for your dreams to reveal what you need to do. Ask your spirit guides for a sign on what you need to do. And we'll talk about that next week. That could be like an offering. It could be paying reparations. It could be donating money. It could be donating your time. There are lots of different ways that you can work on that hex. Yeah. Okay, my friends, any questions before I let you go? Today was impressive. I really enjoyed today's talk. Next week is going to be even cooler. We're going to talk about how to pull strings. We're going to talk about how to cut cords. We're going to talk about how to do psychic surgery. We're going to talk about how to raise chi in order to magnetize our hands, in order to feel where any parasites, hexes, curses might be. And we're going to talk about different ways to continue on with the psychic hygiene, meaning how often should we be cleansing? How do we cleanse? Is it important? Do we need to actually do it? You know, different ways that we can cleanse our spirit, different ways that we can cleanse our aura and maintain a positive and ongoing positive karma bank. Okay. So I hope you guys have an amazing rest of your week. By the way, I just wanted to let you know that I am primarily a business coach. So if you are new here, I would love for you to go to www.theprofitablepsychic.com and just learn a little bit more about me, who I am. I've been a professional psychic since 2012. I started on the psychic hotlines, then I moved to Etsy, and then I had my own business for a while doing spiritual life coaching. And for the last 4 or 5 years, I've been primarily a psychic business coach, and I have lots of free trainings up on YouTube. There's lots more free trainings that go along in this series. And there's also a free class that you can take. It's called Discover Your Soul's Calling Through Spiritual Life Coaching. It's a quiz that you take, and it will tell you about your specific archetype combination. There's 4 different ones. There's the healer, there is the warrior, the shaman, and the mystic, okay? And it'll tell you different business models and different ways you can sell your time and services and products based upon those particular archetypes. So some are best for like membership sites. Some are best for offering one-on-one coaching. Some are best becoming teachers. And so that will kind of tell you a little bit about that. And then in addition to that, you will also get an introductory, like if you're a tarot reader, if you're interested in becoming a spiritual life coach, there is a free course on that about like what it means to become a spiritual life coach, how you can transition into it, how you can start charging more for your services. Oh, you got shaman. Yeah, I have shaman. So personally, I am 50-50 warrior shaman, and then I have a little bit of mystic in my combination. Oh, you're a healer and a mystic. Okay, very interesting. So your purpose is to teach other people how to heal themselves. That's what a mystic does. A mystic is a teacher, and a healer, how to heal yourself. So you have a calling to be a spiritual teacher, teaching healing. All right, guys, have a great day. This will be on YouTube, and I'll see you guys next week. Bye.